Hello, everyone. Just making sure I wasn't crazy about that Black Star actually being a good amp. It sounds nice. It gets sadly fizzy when you push it, like I mentioned, and it's not a perfect amp. But compared to everything else that they make and a lot of other things on the market, some with very much more regarded names, it's actually quite good and could be made really, really great with just a few tweaks. But that's not what we're here for. So let me take off this gate on my mic. And here we are. And put on a little bit of background noise suppression. And have a sip of coffee. And we'll get started. Watched back last Saturdays. And I forgot that the little AI thing I used to remove background noise just really did a number on the sound of the acoustic guitar there that I played for a little bit. I'm going to get some new strings on that guitar because they've been on there for about 6 months because I don't play it as often as I'd like to. And then I'll do it on the channel sometime without that effect on. Play that riff on a Les Paul on the neck pickup. Well, I don't have a Les Paul, and my 335 and my SG are in their case right now because I've had all the construction going on, and I don't like leaving the Gibson headstocks out on stands for obvious reasons. Let me get to the top of the chat. Hey, Victor, aloha. We can get started. Victor is here. Steve Thompson. I know that the first questions are a little out of order as I get to them, and then we'll get caught up to the actual sequence that came in. I had installed the Fromel Supreme Mod Kit in my 68 Custom Deluxe Reverb prior to hearing my slightly unfavorable comment on Fromel in one video. Will I elaborate safely in this forum? Yeah, I'll elaborate. Number one, most of the Fromel stuff is changing one capacitor for the exact same value capacitor from a different brand. So you're not going to get much difference there. A few places he makes some changes. But the biggest problem with Fromel kits is that they are sold to people who have PCB amps like yours. And a PCB has a hole of a certain diameter on that board for the lead of a capacitor to go through. And the capacitors that amp came with were some IC brand radials, which have a relatively small diameter lead. And if you were to replace them all with Panasonic ECQs, which all have the same diameter lead, there'd be no problem. But what happens is he ships them with 715p series and 716p series orange drops, which have a much, much thicker diameter lead. And so people, first of all, don't know how to desolder and solder on that PCB, which is a very thin layer, single-sided, not through hole. It's a very fragile board anyway. And then they jam that resistor lead, or sorry, capacitor lead through a hole which is too small, and it just tears up the pad on the other side, and then you have all kinds of bad connections, and a lot of people end up damaging their board, and then you don't have a good result at all. And at the end of it, the amp's going to sound pretty much exactly the same. You're not going to hear a monumental difference between this film cap and that film cap and a Fender with those gain levels. So I think while he's found a way to sell about $7 of parts for about $40, good business model there. It's not a good service to provide to people. And they don't solve the main issues any of the series that they're implemented and have, like the 68 CDR has got a really high noise floor. It'll still have a really high noise floor after the Fromel mods. If you get a Hot Rod Deluxe, you can damage your board changing out orange drops. You're still going to have the burning from the low voltage supply. So you're not getting anything that you think you're paying for. Hey, Federico, I have had the Tony Bruno model. Sorry, I sounded so emotional when I said that. I have had the Tony Bruno model. I was very unimpressed. It was very much a Fender in a Vox cab. It didn't sound very good. It wasn't a very good Fender-inspired circuit. I don't see why that thing was so marketed or why they chose to do it. And Vinicius, hola Vinicius, obrigado for being here. I hope you enjoyed the thumbnail. We'll get to that. I saw someone else asked about the thumbnail. I really enjoyed the speaker shootout. Thank you very much. I went for the ET65 a few months ago, and one thing I noticed is now the normal channel sounds very different from the tremolo channel, darker and quieter. Is that normal, or did my tech miss anything? Happy to talk to you again. Cheers, my friend. I assume you mean in a deluxe reverb reissue. Well, if your tech left the bright cap on the vibrato channel, and you had the C12K before you changed to the ET65, the C12K does not have any extended high-end response. It's just nasal mids. It's got a lot of mids, but it's not the kind you want. But you're not going to hear the stuff that's really happening above 2K very much with the C12K. If you change to the ET65, the Alessandro, the G12C, a Veteran 30, a Vintage 30, almost any speaker in the world besides the C12K, you will actually hear all the high-end stuff that is actually coming out of the amp circuit. So right now, what's probably happening is before you couldn't hear the big difference between, and the greenback, Sean, you couldn't really hear the difference between the two channels, but it was there because there was a blanket on your entire cab from that C12K, and now you have the ET65, and you can hear that bright cap does stuff up here that the normal channel doesn't have because the normal channel doesn't have that bright cap. Now, a lot of players, me included, prefer to take that bright cap out of a deluxe reverb because you can still get all that stuff with a treble knob, but I think that's probably what's going on. You're only now are you really hearing what your amp has been trying to make happen all this time. The 65 reissue deluxe reverb is a really good sounding amp that doesn't sound really good with any of the speakers that Fender has traditionally shipped it with. It used to be the generic Eminence made for Fender design speaker than the C12K. There are a couple of limited editions where they'll come out with a Greenback 65 or a Greenback, and those sound good. I think the Greenback's kind of at its max ability in a deluxe reverb, but the ET65 and the Greenback 65 are fantastic pairings for that, as is the Alessandro, which I really like. Joshua Stevens says, cool thumbnail photo. Yeah, that's one of my photos from when we were in Lisbon, Lisboa. I went to the Fado Museum, and those are Portuguese guitars, guitarra portuguesa. And they were just some of the most beautiful instruments I've ever seen or played or heard. They're 12-string. They're tuned very differently. They're kind of in between what we consider a guitar and a lute. And it's just phenomenal. And if you listen to the way it's designed to be played, it's an entirely different way to play guitar. And typically they'll have one guy with that and another guy playing a flamenco guitar, a classical guitar, nylon string. And it is just one of the most beautiful sounds. I want to get one. Someday I'm going to order one, and then I'll probably won't play it where anyone can hear it for about 6 months while I figure out how to make kind of a passable sound. But if you really, they like glue little bits of plastic to their nails, and they have a weird wire thing for their thumb. It's a very unusual tradition, but it is one of the most beautiful sounds I've ever heard. Oops, wrong button. Cheese Pizza. Hey, Cheese Pizza. Finished your 5F1 build. Was testing on Workbench while I wait for the cab to arrive. A lot of hum at low volume. Increases around 9 or 10 on the knob and then disappears at max volume. Searches point at possible bad grounds. Speaker jack wired to lug on output transformer. Yeah. You don't want to have the speaker jack ground wired to a lug on the output transformer. Never ground to your output transformer lugs. Never, never, never. Have volume pot ground wired to PT volt lug plus AC ground. Yeah, you're doing everything wrong. I don't mean to be mean. You're doing everything wrong. Wire a Fender 5F1 precisely as Leo Fender told the girls on his line to wire it. Wire it just the way Lupe did. And you will not do anything with the grounds the way you're describing. You are going to have ground issues. Look at the 5F1 schematic. Most of the schematics out there also, the top page is the schematic and the second page is the layout. Copy the layout precisely. Later, you can worry about why. I've got several videos on ground schemes up. I've got 45 minutes here, 45 minutes there on whys. I'm not going to do that again here. But when in doubt, copy what Leo did, not what some guy on the internet in some forum says, oh, you just do this. Now, I say that knowing that from a certain perspective, I am just some guy on the internet. But I'm right. Mark, I saw that you got your surgery scheduled. I hope you're gonna feeling better afterwards. I know how bad that stuff can weigh you down in every way. And cheese pizza. I'm not trying to be a dick to you. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to belittle you. A lot of people do what you've done, and they get those results. You need to. Until you really understand everything that you're seeing, just copy what Leo Fender did because he was really good. There's a reason 67 years later we still talk about his amps. Hey, Derek Colby Jack, could I please explain harmonics? Specifically first, second, and third harmonics. Well, that's a really deep subject with even an odd order harmonic structure. And I think you really need to read up on that because if I were to first of all, start talking about it here. I don't have any charts or diagrams to show you to really make the points. And second of all, I might get something wrong just from memory. Those are things that when I'm doing an actual design, I have to refresh my memory on those subjects a little bit because it's very complicated. Math is hard. It's really hard. Hit the wrong button again. Keep doing that. Local Christian rock guitarist looking forward to some amp talk while holding our 2-week-old. Congratulations. That is an amazing time, and they smell so good at that age. And they stay right where you put them. It's bliss. And at 2 weeks old, they haven't done the thing where you've got to get up in the middle of the night and walk until they stop screaming at you for hours and hours. And you can't walk right by their bed or anywhere. The only place that they'll stop screaming at you is if you walk in the kitchen. Your mileage may vary, but it's not very. Every person I know who's gone through that is like, yeah, 4 a.m, try not to fall over dead while holding the child. But you're a few months away from that period. They're cute, and they have tiny, teeny fingernails, and they smell good. So enjoy every second of that. Matt Johnson, I'm glad you're feeling better because having a week-long cold sucks. I just love seeing people from all over the country and all over the world being here. We need a lot more of that these days. That's one of the reasons I chose the photo from Portugal for the thumbnail. As I keep getting told by various trolls working for various agencies that I should think very little of Europe and their weak beef. It's just insane. Just the lies, the inaccuracies, the insanity, and the compensation for. Apparently, we've got an entire government right now with very small dicks. I'm sure they have very loud sports cars. They're just trying to project some kind of macho bullshit, and they're going to take us all down with them. Did Amnesia? I don't know an amp repair guy in the San Francisco Bay Area. The guys I did know who were there have retired, but I imagine that some of the California guys here might know. Sorry. I know an awful lot of good techs, but I can't know everyone. Hey, Matt. Yeah, this Eric Johnson is fantastic. In its way, it's as good as the K line. They're very different sounding guitars. This is certainly quite a bit heavier. It's like 8.5 pounds, I think, but it is so pretty, and the neck feels so good. Granted, these are not the Eric Johnson pickups because they were too noisy for my needs, and I love having the Kinman noiseless. Because when I use the other guitars with traditional single coils, they can sound great, but there are certain positions that I cannot use, especially in close proximity to an amp. Even with this, I'm not going to show it right now. I have to turn channels on. If I hold this up to the transformers, it still picks up noise. But I think the EJ is the best production Strat Fender has made in a long time. Thanks, HP Violin. Yeah, I mean the black people are always like, you don't like anything. Look, when an amp is good, I'll shout it from the rooftops. This is a very good amp. It's not a great amp. It could have been for a few pennies more, but it's a very good amp. Best mods for the 64 Deluxe Custom Reverb. Sell it to someone else and buy an amp instead. For that money, you could have had all kinds of early 70s Silverface Deluxe Reverbs, gotten them fixed up and be an infinitely better amp. The 64 Deluxe doesn't need to be modded. It needs to be gotten rid of. Hey, George. No, I've never had any of the Alessandro amps come through. I've had a couple of amps, Deluxe Reverbs that he's modded, and overall the work was good. I didn't think it was fantastic, but it was good. But I don't know whether he did that work or whether he's got people in his shop doing Alessandro mods. I don't know. I imagine that the time spent on an amp that's going to go to Gilmore is going to be a little bit different than the amp that's going to be going to Ohio, but maybe not. Maybe he just does incredible work, and the ones that I have had in, he had a bad head cold or something. Alex241, is Eric Johnson my favorite Strat? I know it has some unique features. Why do I like mine? It's the first production Strat I ever got that felt like 50s and 60s Strats that I've played. And I used to work at a vintage guitar store in the 80s, back when there were still a lot of vintage guitars floating around. They weren't all in the vaults of investment bankers, etc. And this has that thing. It's not as lightweight as some of the best examples, but that varies by guitar. It has a fantastic neck. It's quarter sawn. The tuning stability is fantastic. Now, granted, I do have the Callahan bridge on it. It's not the stock bridge, because the stock bridge had some tuning issues, despite all their marketing. It's just a very good Strat. Let me show you my other two while we're on the subject. You guys have seen a lot of the K-line recently, so that the K-line's like my most traditional. It's basically a 63, 64, and it sounds fantastic and it plays fantastic. It has a very small neck for my usual preferences, but it's not tiny and it's not like Ibanez. This is my coverall bases modern Strat. So this is Musicraft neck, Fender body, Goto locking tuners, Sir, and these are the 67 Mojo Tone quiet coils, and I've got the Sir, so I can go into parallel mode as well as series. I'll show that in a second. And then I've got a blend here, so I can bring the neck pickup in with other things. Let me change over. There are certain good amps that need to be tested with the humbucker and the bridge. And sometimes if I'm doing a lot of amps, it's nice just to have this one guitar by the bench, and I can do all the traditional stuff and the rocking stuff. I'll make sure it's in tune before I subject you to it. The weather's been changing a lot, not just tornadoes, but humidity and temperature. Yeah, everything's sharp. Just a second. It's worth it, I promise. What y'all doing? I'm watching some guy tune a guitar. But there are a lot of YouTube channels that have guitar that don't take this step. And I can only take about 4 seconds of that stuff, so. It's a very stable guitar, despite the fact that it was out because it's been hanging on the wall unplayed for about a week. But it also has a 510 bridge, so 2-point, a little more stable than the 6 saddles. This is kind of I love Alex Lifeson. People know that. This is kind of. We lose the mic? Just a second, I got a freaking Amber Alert. Sorry, I have a gate set up so that when I play, this mic shuts off, and I forgot. So I'm gonna turn the gate on so that you're only hearing the mic on the amp, and I'll talk about it afterwards. Anyway, I was saying these 3 positions are traditional. Then I've got a choice on here of this with this in parallel or series. So here's in series, in parallel. It's going to be a little glassier. And now you should be able to hear me because I turned this down. Now I'm going to show the bridge in full humbucker, and then it's in a series, which sounds to me like a single coil on this particular pickup. Then I can blend in the neck with any of those positions. So. And that means I can also get all 3 pickups on at the same time. So this is still a very useful guitar to have, even if it's not quite as nice as Eric Johnson, even if it's not as nice or as authentic as the K-Line. The noiseless stuff is very important to me for doing stuff at the bench, testing amps. And this is still a good sounding guitar. Maybe we'll do the K-Line later, but let me get to people's amp questions. Sorry about forgetting about the gate, because if I have that mic on the amp and this mic picking up the amp, it distorts out there and it sounds weird. So, where were we? Hey, Jeff Motter, you're very welcome. I'm glad the mods on your Princeton reissue paid off, and you know, it's a good amp. Just needs a little bit of help. I'm glad your local tech was able to do that for you. Did Amnesia, which is better overall for tone, guitar at 10 or amp past 6? What? Both. Well, the amp setting's going to depend on the amp and what sound you're trying to get, but you're always going to get the best sound out of an amp if the guitar volume is at 10. You're just giving it a better signal. Now, there are times when it's nice to change that because of the loading for a different sound, but in terms of the best response, you want to give, at least with single coils, you want to give the amp as much to work with as possible. Any recommendations for 630 volt caps with 10 millimeters between their leads? Yeah, go to Mauser and put in 630 volt film caps, 10 millimeter lead spacing, and you can choose between Panasonic and Wema, the Wema polypropylene or their polyesters. They're all going to be good caps if you go with either Panasonic or Wema, and there's tons of 630 volt 10 millimeter lead spacing caps out there. Hey, Kenichi's got a 71 VSL AC30, which still has a tag strip hand wiring to JMI spec. However, for some reason, it sounds quite muffled and doesn't have the sparkly treble. Any tips, caps, resistors? There could be an awful lot causing that. I'd have to see your particular amp. You could have all kinds of problems in a amp from 1971. I'm from 1971. And I've got all kinds of problems. I would love to, have your amp here to look at it, but I don't have a crystal ball. Sorry. There's just so many reasons that could be the case in an old AC30. Sorry. Hey, Rock and Roll Philistine, which mods would I do in a Champ AA764 to make it sound more like a twin, assuming it would be used with a 2x12 cab? Which one is the AA764? Is that just the regular Champ? Let's see here. Sorry, I have a hard time remembering certain numbers and strings of numbers. Doopy-doopy-doo. So AA764. Not American Airlines, thanks. Almost there. Come on. That's a silver-faced Champ. Okay. Okay. Just make sure I was going to tell you the one that you're actually asking. That the one I was describing was the one you're asking about. That Champ's got a 15K mids resistor instead of a 6.8K, and most Fender Twins, if you turn the mids pot to noon, you're going to get about 1 to 1.5K. So that's what I look at. You've got a 15K mids resistor on the bass pot. Change that out or put something in parallel with it and play around with everything between 1 and 10K as far as your ultimate value, and that'll bring down the mids of the amp, and then you'll have an overall tonal response more like other larger Fenders, especially if you're going to use it with a 2x12, because that 15K really makes the tone stack not do as much as far as the treble and bass response, and it really gives a very congested mid sound. I'm not a big fan of that 15K resistor in a Champ. Is there an audible difference in carbon comp and carbon film? Hey, Tuig. Yeah, there is, but you won't always hear it. It's going to depend on a lot of factors. First of all, carbon composites can be noisier than carbon films. They are not always noisier. You can have a very healthy carbon comp that'll be slightly noisier than a typical carbon film, but some bad carbon comps are just crazy noisy, but that's not indicative of all carbon comps. Second of all, how noisy something is depends on its value and where it is in the circuit. For instance, a 1 meg resistor has the potential to be a lot noisier than a 1K resistor. Second of all, a resistor going to ground, it's not going to put noise in your signal the way a resistor used for a plate or that the signal passes through can. So a mixed resistor or a plate resistor that's noisy, you're going to hear that. Second of all, there is a harmonic difference between the various materials used, typically metal film, carbon composite. You won't always hear those differences depending on the stage of the amp or where in the circuit they're used. So a plate resistor, sure, it can have these qualities because there's a lot of voltage across it. If you're talking about a cathode resistor, which has got like 1 volt and is not directly in the signal path, you're not going to necessarily hear any difference between a metal film, or carbon composite on a cathode resistor. So on that level, there's a lot of misconceptions because people are comparing apples to oranges to pina coladas. Second of all, you won't always hear a difference if you change out this plate resistor, this plate resistor, this plate resistor. You may or may not hear any difference if you change these two. This one, you might hear a difference because there's a different voltage present. But the biggest point you got to look at is that you're not going to have a silver bullet difference with any one of these components. Changing one resistor is not going to transform the amp. If you do all the plates and all the stuff in the signal path and all the grid leaks with one material versus the other, at the end you will have a slightly different feeling and sounding amplifier. But it's a systemic thing. You have to have a whole bunch of stuff cumulatively adding up to an effect. And you can cross the streams. You can say, all right, for the first stage, we're going to do all the heavy lifting, but it's not going to be driving the tube at all. We're just getting the guitar signal up to a point where the other tubes can be driven. I'll use a metal film for that. It'll do the heavy lifting. It'll get up to where I want the level to be. That stage is not going to be clipping. There's not going to be a distortion generated there. So I'll just not have any extra noise. I'll do a 2-watt metal film for V1A. And at that point, I've got a pretty healthy level that can distort the next tube stage, the next triode. It could overdrive that. So for the next triode, I might try a carbon film, might try a carbon composite, and see if, combination with the bias and everything else, the math stuff, if I detect a sound difference. But you're not going to, the only difference you're going to hear in the first gain stage of a typical guitar amp is if you have a noisy one or not. So might as well go for the quiet one there. All right, Steve Thompson, I don't know which amp you have. So you got WEMA caps. WEMAs are not typically used in terms of like the little red ones. Did you do a Marshall kit? Because a lot of guys out there are doing like the Blues Junior and Hot Rod Deluxe and Deluxe Reverb kits, and those are coming with orange drops that I've seen. Hey, Chris Butler. Yeah, I was shocked to see all the way through that Black Star video, and there was no hard and always warranted complaints. Yeah, it's funny to me. I try to present just how things are. So here I'm like, okay, this amp company typically doesn't do very good stuff. I don't have a high estimate of them, but on this model, they've done everything pretty much right. A couple of things I think could be better, but it's a good amp. And I've got people in the comments saying, I don't care, it's Chinese crap, never buy it, blah, blah, blah. It's going to sound like a piece of shit. Obviously, it doesn't sound like a piece of shit. And it's not going to have any problems. It's a well-made amp. Conversely, on the car videos this week, I'm like, hey, yeah, it's got a lot of stuff in there that looks kind of weird. It's got a lot of silicone. I don't know how he makes a dime making them that way. Because that's a lot of extra unnecessary labor. And he can't pass all that on because he has to compete with people who aren't doing that kind of thing. And I think it's a little bit silly that he does some of the over the kill gloop. But I was like, despite all that, and that it's not visually the prettiest thing, this is a really well designed amp. And people are like, I don't care. I wouldn't buy anything that looks like that. I'm like, well, who you gonna believe, me? Who you gonna believe, me or your lying eyes? Because a lot of people don't know what they're looking at. I know what I'm looking at, and while I don't like it aesthetically, it's a good amp, and he did everything right. And I tried to be fair to both to Carr and to Blackstar, and people were arguing with both those things. So, oh well. What are my thoughts of installing a 12AX7 inside the chassis of an amp? People have been doing that in various designs for decades and decades. 12AX7s just don't get that hot. ATs in like a reverb driver can, or sometimes in a cathode follower stage, but AXs inside a chassis are going to be absolutely fine. Look at almost every Dumbolator styled effects loop thing made. All of the Alembic FX1s out there have been operating for decades and decades, and they've got internally mounted 12AX7s with no airflow, and they're fine. David S., in the process of converting my YBA to Super Lead specs, and notice I wouldn't change the YBA to Super Lead specs. You've already got a YBA. You've got an amp that there are fewer of than there are Super Leads. I've never played a Trainer YBA and thought, well, I sure wish this were just like the more common amp out there. And the only changes I'll make on a YBA, besides improving the ground scheme and getting rid of the stupid circuit breaker, is I will put in audio taper pots instead of the linear taper volumes, because the volumes just tear your head off. And some of the bright caps that they chose are just insanely bright and harsh. So I'll defang the bright caps, and I'll put in audio taper pots. I think the tone stacks of the YBA sounds great. Now it's all subjective, but you have a good sounding unique amp. I would hesitate to recommend that you make it sound like an amp that everyone else in the world already has. I have not finished up Ocarina of Time. Oddly, I have very little free time. I've made it as far as the Fire Temple. One of the reasons is that controller I got, the stick accuracy was terrible. And the second controller I got, the stick accuracy is terrible. So you cannot aim with the thing. It's like nothing, then everything. And I used to use the old Nintendo 64 controller and I never had any problems. I've got two other cheap controllers on the way. The nice thing about this is the ones that don't work for me, I can send back, get my money back. So I'm kind of like borrowing them all, and whatever works will stay. For the 2 or 3 times a week, I've got 30 minutes to goof off. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of most 3D games. I can't do any of the ones. I can't really do the ones after Ocarina of Time, or GoldenEye. Though I helped my kid with Twilight Princess back in the day, and that was fun. Though it got very confusing trying to figure out what was going on. The way that the camera chooses to move always wants to fuck me up. Hey, Ed Riley. His AB763 head, the treble response seems to cut off around 3 or 4K. It sounds more like an upper mid. Is there any easy way to mod the treble pot's EQ to a higher value, aka Fender chime? You should have a ton of stuff over 3 to 4K out of AB763. I don't know whether yours is one of the later ones that have the 1 nanofarad or 2 nanofarad caps from grid to ground on the output tube stages. If you have your output sockets, you've got some extra caps from the grids to ground there, that could be shaving that off. You could have some upper frequency oscillation that you're not hearing directly, because it's not coming through the speaker, and you probably don't have a scope to see it, but you'd be hearing the effect of that, where you could have a blanket over the high end off of that. But I would not mod the tone stack of a AB763, because that tone stack has tons of high end. Did you hear the Deluxe Reverb speaker comparisons videos? All that was done with a slightly modded Fender 65 reissue Deluxe Reverb. Now, my mods on that primarily were a few places to move stuff that got hot off the board to the octal sockets, and some upgraded capacitors for this picofarad values, where that makes a difference, and some shielded wires. But the core circuit was exactly the same, and it sounded really good and had plenty of stuff up above over 4K. Hey, Kenichi, Alnico Silver 70s versus 60s, any sound differences due to differences in cones doping based on my experience? I don't know, because I have not had a chance to hear any of them in brand new condition. And so 60s and 70s speakers, once reconed with good voice coils, they can all be fantastic. But then they take away some of the regional differences. And so I would have to be playing and contrasting two or more than one set of each in the same condition. And I've never had 60s and 70s here at the same time. And sometimes I'll get an amp in that would say have some from 72, and they were already out. And so I can't judge my opinion on 70s T1088s based on the ones that needed to be reconed. So I would have to talk to someone who just had a warehouse of old amps with working original speakers, and that's not me. Though my room can resemble that, it is not dedicated to that. I have no thoughts on Amplified Nation amps, Ashley Weaver. I have not had one in or even played one in person, so I didn't like Doom at all. Or there's another one that came out about after Doom. I don't know. It's all millions of things fighting in dungeons thing that was very popular. I never liked it. Yeah, I did a lot of 8 and 16-bit stuff. Yeah, I went when I was in Lisbon. I had a day off while Nikki was doing a conference, and Quake. No, not Quake. It was something with like Dungeons and Dragons kind of thing with like orcs and trolls and stuff. I don't remember. Anyway, something Warhammer. I don't remember. Anyway, had a day off to myself in Lisbon, and besides taking the train to Belém to get some pastéis de nata, pastéis de Belém, which were phenomenal. And the best coffee I found in Europe. I made the trek up the Warcraft. That's what it was. I made the trek up the hill by the convent, the Carmelo convent at the Baja Alta. Is that it? It's Baja Alta, and there was a shop up there that sold Portuguese guitars, and I went in and played several, and I apologized and said, I do play guitar, but I've never played this instrument, and I know that I'm going to sound terrible, but I'd really would like to. And they were very, very kind, and I played for about 20 minutes. And if I could have popped one in my luggage right then and there, I would have, but we just flew with carry-on. I'm going to have to order one at some point. Just beautiful, beautiful sound. Hey, have Spacesuit Will Travel. Thoughts on Sir Bella? The Sir Bella is one of the best amps being made today. I highly recommend it to anyone who wants a big, clean amp with reverb. It's just, it's basically a 40-watt 1x12 Fender adjacent thing, and it's fantastic, and it's well made, and it sounds great. And people, I don't know, it should be just one of the number one amps in the world. People either want to spend a lot more for a Two-Rock or a lot less for a used Hot Rod Deluxe. I think this Sir Bella is phenomenal. Hey, Jeff, he's got a 65 Princeton meaning reissue with the C10R. If I chose to upgrade, what I recommend, I play blues and classic rock. You mean upgrade the speaker? I don't dislike the C10R. Is it the best? No, but it's a good sounding speaker. But yeah, for blues and classic rock, I have not tried the 10-inch Alessandro. I imagine that you'd probably be very happy with either the ET10 or the Celestion G10. Is it G10? The Gold 50. It's 50 watts, but the 10-inch Alnico that they make. What? Sorry, my phone is letting me know that it's going to rain, and we're probably all going to die. The ET10 or the 10-inch Celestion Alnico would probably be great choices, and I would hazard a guess that the Alessandro 10 would also be good, though I've not tried it for blues and classic rock. If you're doing, if you want a more clean stuff, I love the G10C, but I think for blues and harder rock, both because the speaker itself lends itself to that, and if you use overdrive pedals, etc., you're not going to get that fizziness you can get with the brighter speakers like the G10C. Well, I'm glad you took that in the spirit that I intended at Cheese Pizza, and I'm not saying that, hey, I'm the end all be all, though I do try to give good information. I've got lots of videos about ground schemes, including Fenders. I highly recommend you watch them because I try to do it in layman's terms with examples in front of you. But short answer is just copy what Leo did. He got it right. Hey, Sean Brooks. How do I feel about the Electro-Harmonix Sovtek copy? I had a MiG-50 when I was in high school and I regret selling it. Well, I've not tried the new one, which seems odd to me because it's a replica of an amp that was a replica of a Marshall. The old Sovtek MiG-50s were copies of Marshall circuits. The MiG-50 was in 1987, but built with surplus Soviet military stuff. So tubes, pots, all these things were Soviet military surplus, which made the cost really cheap. Plus the fact that they were made in the former Soviet Union for pennies on the dollar compared to what the same thing coming out of America or England cost. But they were very strange, and if you needed to work on them, you could not change out that capacitor for a Western standard capacitor because everything about it, the way it's screwed into the chassis, you can't replace that, and the tube sockets would be similarly weird. And so the MiG-50s were phenomenal sounding amps, but very hard to keep running this long since 30 years later. But now, so the Soviets copied Marshall. Now Electro-Harmonix, who distributes Russian tubes, is copying a Russian-made amp, which is a copy of it's just getting a copy of a copy of a copy. So it seems strange to me. Why not just make the Electro-Harmonix version of the Marshall? Because they're not going to have the same parts that made the Sovtek unique. I know I keep going between Sovtek and Sovtek. Someone told me that it should be pronounced Sovtek because Soviet and how the Russians actually pronounce it. I grew up saying Sovtek, and I flip-flop on that. Let's see. You have ground noise in your room. Is there a product or strategy I recommend to get the best ground possible? Find a room in your house which has a good ground and run an extension cable to it if you need to. Good grounds are everything, and the alternative is to hire an electrician to rewire your house correctly. But if you have one room where you have a good circuit, run an extension cable, even if it means, hey, I've got to go in the other room and unplug it and coil it up until it's time for me to be able to play again. Do what you need to do. Ground is everything. Hey, Jimmy Mack, he's thinking of building a Blackface Deluxe reverb, but single channel with treble middle bass, tone stack, no tremolo or reverb. What circuit tweaks do I recommend for reliability and tone? Well, the only thing that you need to do is remember that V2B and V1B in the traditional deluxe reverb share a cathode. So in that amp, you've got an 820 ohm resistor bypass by a 25 or 22 microfarad cap. In your single channel version, to get the same gain response, you'd use 1.5K bypassed with a 10 microfarad. And then remember that you have two mixer resistors in the AB763 that you would not need for mixing channels, but you still need to have the effect of a mixed resistor. And I covered this in the 68 custom video. You need to play around and find out what instead of having the 220K from the vibrato channel mixed in with the 220K connected to the standard channel, you would need to give some kind of path to ground there, and probably start with a 1 meg. You can do the math. You can just try some different resistors till you find, hey, that's the level that I want. But other than that, you can just build it as it is. There's not going to be a huge difference in the preamp between not having the other preamp tubes connected. Your voltages aren't going to be that radically different. Thank you, Tone Control. Where can I get a list of specific mods for the 64 Fender Deluxe Custom Reverb? I have the ability to do the mods. I don't have a list of specific mods. I don't think that amp should be modded. I think that amp should be sold. It's a terrible amp. The last one that I didn't mod it. I totally gutted it and made it into an amp for someone. But the tremolo is bad. The power transformer is bad. The build quality is horrible. I wouldn't sink any money into one. I would sell it to someone else and buy something else. If you have the ability to do mods, you could build a better amp yourself. And I appreciate the super chat, but I can't let that affect my answer. I have to be honest with you. Regardless, it's not a good amp. It's not worth modding. If you really insist on modding it, I don't have a specific list. Not for $5. Sorry, I'm too busy for that. But I did show in my video how I relayed out, use the same board that you have to give an opto tremolo and stuff like that. But I also had to change out the power transformer because the power transformer in that $3,000 amp is a piece of... Danielle, yes, we did enjoy Vino. In fact, we had Vino Verde for the first time. We were in the Belém, and we just walked past the monument to the Discoveries and then past the Tower of Belém, and we found this great seafood restaurant. We could tell it was great because it was full of well-dressed families, and we had fantastic seafood. I think she had this kind of it's like a seafood bread soup, and I had a lobster and rice dish with saffron, and it was fantastic. And they brought out Vino Verde. It was the first time we'd had it, and we have found a couple of different brands, Broadbent, especially here in the States, where it's like $10 a bottle and phenomenal. We love Vino Verde, and we also discovered the joys of good peri-peri sauce on that trip. Not the Nando's stuff. The Nando's stuff is crap, but good peri-peri, or peri-peri, depending on your region. We enjoyed Lisbon very, very much. Hey, Daniel Ramirez. I'm sorry to hear that your amp tech passed away. You've got a Tweed Deluxe clone. Can you change the tubes on your own? Yeah, that's a cathode biased amp, so you don't need to bias the tubes. A new pair of 6v6s from time to time. You don't need to do anything. Just change out the tubes as you need it to, and reach out to Ryra if you have any questions beyond that. If they made it, they should understand everything in that. It's a very simple circuit. And it's a great sounding circuit when done right. It sounds like yours is, but you can change the tubes yourself. Dustin, you met the Valve Jr. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Well, You're still cool in my book, man, despite that slumming with the Valve Junior. It's just such a bad amp. Hey, Ali, second mail. Right now, go with the Electro Harmonic 6v6 GT from a good tube vendor, like the Tube Store or Tube Depot. Not from Guitar Center, not from Musician's Friend, not from Sweetwater, not from eBay. An actual tube dealer who will send you a replacement if something goes wrong, who also tests them and sorts them and matches them, and not tubesandmore.com. Go to a real good tube dealer. 5881s, there's just a few of them made on the market. Most of the ones that are labeled as 5881s are actually 6L6s. So if you need a 6L6, I really like the Tungsol 6L6 GC STR. If you really need a 5881, I believe Tungsol does make one, and Electro Harmonics might make one, but usually 5881s, people just really want a 6v6 instead. It was just a period where people were buying the Sovtek 5881s, which is just a coin base, a wafer based version of the Sovtek 6L6. Bill Avonda, I decided that between hand-holding people trying to install those things, which I don't have time or patience for, or possibly any legal repercussions from Fender, it was just a nightmare I could not do. So I have not gone forward making replacement boards for that. And I occasionally repair and upgrade 68 Custom Deluxe reverbs, but I'm very selective about taking them in because it makes me sad to have to do them. All right, we're going to take our first 7-minute intermission now because it is raining like crazy. And when it rains, I pours. It's a mental thing. I'm like, I've got to go. So what do I mean by Coinbase? Most output tubes have a thick plastic base like this, and that's what a bear trap retainer grabs onto. A Coinbase doesn't have this. It just has a little bitty plastic lip, just, that's why they call it a Coinbase. Imagine if you just saw, see if I can show you, that much of it sticking up, just a little plastic rim. And so you put it in the socket and the bear trap tries to grab the glass and bad things happen. I don't have any Coinbases here to show you because I try to avoid having them. Anyway, let's do a first 7-minute intermission because this rain, it gets to me. See you in a bit. All right, let's get back into this. Ah, Clarendon Blue, thank you very much. I will. Oh, thank you very much. I will certainly take you up on that more coffee offer. In fact, I left my coffee in the other room. Damn it. So let me get that real quick. It's just right outside the door. I need to sort out my priorities. All right, where were we? The inside of that black star looked like a work of art. It looked good. I was very, very impressed by it. Let's see. Good on you, Matt. We all need to do more of that. It's crazy. They're talking about, they won't buy American beef and chicken, and our beef is so strong and their beef is so weak. First of all, they don't want to buy our beef and chicken because we load it up with growth hormones and bleach and all kinds of crap, inject water into it to make it weigh more. Try to cook hamburger from Kroger without having just a pan full of water and it boiling in the skillet because they've added so much water to it to make it expensive without actually giving you the hamburger that you wanted to buy. And I'm not talking like ground beef. I'm talking about buying chuck or ground round, etc. Second of all, when I've been in Europe, I go to the boucherie in Paris or the quality of the meat is just so much better. The stuff that I would have to special order here in Memphis, just in your local butchery, everywhere. It's gorgeous stuff. Like in England, while they don't have a clue what to do with them, their eggs are gorgeous. These beautiful, beautiful eggs with golden yolks and wonderful textures. If they only had discovered salt and pepper and other flavorings. I love my UK friends. I love the UK. But damn, why conquer the world to get spices only not to use them? Brown sauce does not count. Yeah, I know. I play the same thing over and over again. It's a baseline of comparison from amp to amp, guitar to guitar. Something up with this K line, it keeps getting static. You just heard that probably. And it's related to the shielding. And so this cavity is not shielded. The pick guard bottom is. And I'm going to also be changing it so I have like the 50s mod, so as I roll down on the volume, it doesn't get dark because this is the traditional wiring. I got to sort out that grounding thing. Other than that, this thing's about perfect. That's enough of that. But yeah, this thing it's a transformative experience. It weighs nothing. It just responds. It's just a lot. I love it. I don't like the headstock at all. I would never have bought that damn thing if I just seen a picture of it because I don't like the headstock aesthetically. But then I played it for a month. Damn it, I'm buying another guitar. Hey, 1000 New Northeast. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. My question is regarding the new Fender Panoverb amp. Is that an amp I like? Well, aesthetically, I think it's one of the ugliest things I've ever seen in my life with all that yellow and flat metal and stuff. And it's just crazy how ugly it is. I don't think it's that interesting a design. Okay, They're doing stuff that other companies did a lot of in the 60s. I think there's a lot of marketing behind it, and I would be very surprised if I liked it if I had played one in person, but I have not. Captain Ron says, you have to be joking. My wife is from France. We visit her family once a year for the last 26 years. Generally, their beef is terrible, like chewing shoe leather, and their chicken's small. Small chickens taste like chicken. Number one, small chicken tastes like chicken. French steaks suck. Entrecote is a terrible cut. Americans and the Brits and the Portuguese and the Italians do steak really well. The French don't do steak well, but they have other beef, which is fantastic. Just skip the entrecote. I don't like the steak and frites. But you have to understand that it'd be like if you could go to any local grocery store and get dry aged ribeye, which you cannot get in most cities. You've got to order it. S. McDonald, if you did a super chat, I will get to it. I have not gotten to it yet. No, but the quality of the produce and the poultry and the beef and the dairy in Europe are just phenomenal. And to lie about it for political gain is just insane to me. Twain said travel is the best inoculation against hatred he knew of, or let's see. Bill Avanda, other than buying an early 70s silver-faced deluxe reverb, do I have any suggestions for modern builder's version of one? Yeah, Sir Bella. That'll do exactly what you need, and it's fantastic. When the Blackstar HT20 style amps die, what would be a good circuit to build in the chassis? Stuart R. asks. I don't know that you could, because the Blackstar HT series is designed around having most of the circuitry being solid state, and so you're left with two preamp tube options. And I'm not sure that you'd be able to change transformers, or whether the transformers could support a full circuit with, say, 6 tubes, etc. I think when the Blackstar HT20 amps die, they go to the landfill as they were designed for. If I was to build an amp, I would not start with an old hybrid amp that's mostly solid state. I would just go buy a cabinet and a chassis and transformers designed to build an amp with. It's like all the people out there trying to make real amps out of Hot Rod Deluxes. Well, you've got to do so much work to get around the oversized holes for all the tube sockets. Just get a different amp to start with. You're going to spend less time, and time is money. Hey, Jeremy Tapero, recently got a 67 Vox Cambridge, solid state, cheap. Sounds cool, but definitely needs a bit of work. Noise at idle and seems to sputter out if turned up much past 3. Is it worth servicing? It depends. If it's just a matter of resistors, and it could just be a matter of resistors and some electrolytics, sure. The trouble with the old solid state Thomas Morgan Vox stuff is that they use germanium transistors, which are extraordinarily expensive if you can find replacements for, and finding the correct replacements is a very difficult thing to do. And it's not like they said, hey, we're going to use a 2N34 for this one and a something else for this. They're just germanium transistors that were sorted by different gain. And so you got to have the ones that they say these are the green ones, these are the yellow ones, these are the blue ones. And it's just you can end up playing whack-a-mole to the tune of $1,000 plus on an old Thomas organ like that. Sorry. What's the weekend like in Memphis? Beautiful day here in Charlotte, North Carolina, except for the evil pollen. Well, we had the evil pollen, but now we're having just constant thunderstorms, flash floods, and we're on a tornado watch. So, David S., do I miss the Les Paul I sold? No, I don't, because a Les Paul, let me move the duck out of the way. A Les Paul in your lap to do this. Just always wants to fall over. And I found that really frustrating, and it never really sat right. And it was cool other than that, but since I do most of my playing sitting at a bench, having the thing tilt over all the time was frustrating. Whereas the 335 stays like this. The Strats, the Tellies, they stay like this. The SG, it stays like this. This is its neutral position. And same for the SG. No neck dive. I can put it in my lap like this and play it all day long. Whereas the Les Paul, I'm constantly trying to pull it back against me. And I don't want to sit. Auto drops from the guitars. Audio. Okay, let me turn off the gate. I know what's happening. I was getting picked up by my voice was coming through the mic on the amp. Anyway, I don't want to have the Les Paul strapped to me to stay like this at the bench because then I'm fighting a guitar while I'm working. Whereas this I can put to the side to work, bring it back up to test, et cetera, et cetera. The Royer sounds fantastic for guitar, but it is a ribbon mic, so it is picking up back here. And as I backed up closer to it, the Royer was getting my voice and triggering the gate on this mic. So, sorry, I need a producer, or at least an engineer, to do it for me. Thank you, Gast. We love you too. Most of us. Those of us still worth talking to. 6 dB threshold, negative 6 dB threshold. I recently built a Mojotone Marshall 2204 50 watts. Sounds as expected. A little harsh on the high end. What is the best way to tame the high end? Am I familiar with treble peak cap mods? The 2204 has got a 470K resistor parallel by a 470 picofarad cap from the low gain input jack to the gain pot. And across that gain pot, they've got a 1 nanofarad bright cap. The first thing to do is lift one end of that bright cap. See if that does it for you. Or then you can reconnect that bright cap and then lift one end of the 470 picofarad cap across a 470K resistor. See if that does it for you. You can lift both of them. See where you end up. You might end up accidentally finding the Dookie mod. But I would say that most players are going to like the emphasis of the 470 picofarad across the 470K, but don't want that bright cap, that 1 nanofarad. That 1 nanofarad is fine if you're only ever using the amp at above 7, the channel volume. But for clean sounds or for anything like mid edge of breakup, it just tears your head off. So that's the harshness right there. So that's what I would suggest trying. Super Twin 180 watts, too damn loud. 70s Bassman 100, too damn boring. Sorry. Do vintage Strats just never need truss rod adjustment? I live in the Northeast and have to adjust my truss rods seasonally. Is there an advantage having to take the neck off to make adjustments? Vintage Strats do need truss rod adjustments. All guitars occasionally need the truss rod adjusted. As necks age, they need it less. They're going to move less with seasonal changes. And the quarter sawn stuff on the Eric Johnson needs adjustment less than the flat sawn stuff or the riff sawn stuff. This is flat, and both my Strats have other Strats. The modern one and the Eric Johnson have quarter sawn. This one's got flat sawn. But over time, because you have, and Brad can answer this more than I can, over time as you have a brass nut bearing against a washer inside the truss rod end against the wood, it compresses the wood, and over time that wood compresses more and more, and then you have to adjust it more and more, and eventually you have to back it out and add another washer. But in general, once the neck gets really stable and loses most of its moisture, it's going to respond to seasonal differences less. But all that said, there is no advantage to have to take the neck off to make adjustments. The advantage of it is it's easy to build. The bullet style stuff, you can actually weaken this area. So a lot of the truss rods that are adjusted down at the headstock end, especially the older styles, you actually end up weakening the wood here, which is already kind of a weak point as it transitions and there's not a tremendous amount of the wood from the neck that actually goes through to here. A lot of times it kind of hands off to its neighbor. So you don't want to weaken this too much. And some of the bullet stuff did. And the Ernie Ball stuff, where you have the thumbnail that protrudes, is fantastic, but there's higher costs to do that. That is the best method out there. But in general, I adjust a truss rod once pretty much in January and once pretty much in July, because those are our extremes of the least humid and the most humid. And I'm talking eighth of a turn. Sometimes I can go a year without having to change the truss rod on the Eric Johnson, but I've had that Eric Johnson now for 20 years. So there are necks that are inherently unstable, and you always have to adjust them. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I do try to do as much production quality as I can when I don't forget about gating and all this stuff. Hey, Jeff McErlane, speaking of production quality, he's got that stuff down. I'd say I look up to him, but I'm much taller. But one of the things about watching better players than me, like Jeff McErlane or Leon Todd, is one of the tricks is that if you don't mute this mic when you're playing, depending on your settings, you may hear the cool overdrive sound coming out of the amp, but you're also going to hear, and depending on the guitar volume and the mic sensitivity, sometimes it's really, really annoying to hear. And the other reason I want to have two mics when I have an actual amp in the room is that even at the volume this is at, this is loud, and if I turn off the Royer, and you hear what this hears, it's got a clip. Because that amp is a lot louder than little old me, at least as I speak when doing this. I used to do theater. I can be very loud, but I don't think you guys really need to have that coming at you from your phones. Hey, Robert, no, you don't need to use standby when you power an amp off. Just follow Marshall's suggestions. Standby is only there for startup mode. That's it. Hans Mosel, the 65 reissue Super Reverb is a really good sounding amp. The downside to it is the ones that are coming with the Italian Jensen speakers. Speakers are very, very bright and kind of take forever to break in. They sound good, but they're just really bright, and it kind of nudges the entire amp a little towards the ice pick. But the amp itself actually sounds great. It just good sounding 4x10s are difficult at a reasonable price point, and they've got to deal with Jensens. They use Jensens, but you know. But the amp itself is a good amp. Yeah, Jeff. Yeah, the string noise is really a trick, you know, and like Leon's all doing the stuff with the fractal. So that's why I guess Jeff wasn't here for this. I've gone when I remember that I have it on. I have a gate on my vocal mic so that when I play, shuts off and you don't get that. Versus being blended in with everything. Now, I don't think you guys understand the balls it takes, the sheer balls it takes to play guitar, knowing that guys like Jeff or Leon or John Cordy are here. And I'm sure half of you guys outplay me on your worst days. But, you know, it is, at some point, doing this on YouTube, just got to say, what the fuck, man? They already know they're good, and they're not, you know. Hey, Alex. you just got to let all that stuff go. We're all musicians of sorts, and you don't want Steve Vai fixing your amp, and you don't want me playing for Whitesnake. I guess he's filling in for Fripp these days. Yeah, the world's ending. Flash flood emergency. Thank you. I've got this thing in Do Not Disturb. I need to say, even if I'm about to die, National Weather Service, don't disturb me. I don't know if there's a button for that. Where was I? I don't have that. Oh, I see why. I don't have the ability to turn that off right now. Let me see that. Where is that thing? Okay, wrong app. I was about to say, I don't need a score editor. Oh, that's Logic. Overlays. That's what I was missing. Okay. Sorry. Shop talk to myself. I was a much better guitarist before hand damage, Wood planers are not your friend. Where were we? Assyrian wants to buy out my Mojotone Vibroverb instead of fix it because it has a bad ground. I didn't build it. Any suggestions for finding a bad ground or video I have made in the past? I have no idea what you're asking there. Did you make a Mojotone Vibroverb and then sell it to someone? I don't know what Assyrian is. So you didn't build it. Did Mojotone build it? In case, talk to Mojotone. I've got half the videos I have on the channel are finding bad grounds, but vibroverbs are very easy to ground. Just do it, just like I said earlier in the chat. When in doubt, copy Fender's layout exactly. If you go to almost any place that's got guitar schematics, the Tube Store has almost all these things. That'd be in the second. And they've got 3 tiers of Fender amps: the Tweed stuff, the 60s stuff, and now the current stuff. Go the 60s stuff, and you click on their schematic. The first page is the schematic. Second page is the layout. Copy the layout exactly. Don't deviate unless you really know what you're doing. Hey, Hulk Hoagie. That's a great one. Have a Tone King Imperial Mark II with built-in attenuation. Also play on the highest attenuation setting, lowest volumes. Apartment life. Can it harm the amp long term? No. You may need to have the amp serviced a little bit down the line as far as stuff that generates heat in the attenuator, but it won't shorten the life of it, harm the amp. But contact Tone King about that. Assyrian is an extended warranty company. Man, you're not going to... All right, let me reread that. Assyrian wants to buy out my Mojotone Vibroverb instead of fix it because it has a bad ground. Assyrian has no knowledge of amps. Ignore them. It's probably something simple. Take it to a tech. Oh my God. Assyrian knows about as much about amplifiers as I know about Assyrian, apparently. I'm not a big believer in extended warranty services. I find the whole thing very scammy. Rogue One returned his Noisy 64 custom deluxe reverb on my recommendation and got a Swart Antares. Somewhere money, way better. Thanks, Lyle. Thank you, Rogue One. And Rogue One, you got an Antares. So, I'm sensing a theme here. That's fantastic. Let's see. Hey, S. McDonald. Greetings from Canada. Well, greetings from Memphis. I've been watching my show for a while now. Do I do repairs or full to point-to-point specs on a 65 Deluxe Reverb reissue for us Canadians? First of all, even in normal conditions, shipping an amp or even just a chassis from Canada to here and back, you're looking at huge customs costs. And now I don't know what would happen or if anyone could afford that. If you really need your amp work done, I know several good techs in Canada. If you're in the Ontario region, in Hamilton specifically, Church Audio, Chris Church is great. There's Dan Tramble in Nova Scotia. Alan is out. Is Alan in Vancouver? So there are a lot of good techs in Canada. Second of all, there's no point in moving a 65 Deluxe Reverb to point because Deluxe Reverbs have never been point to point. They've always been fiberboard construction, and you don't want a point-to-point Deluxe Reverb. Second of all, there's no point in making any sweeping changes to a 65 reissue. It's a good amp. I've got videos that any good tech can look at and say, okay, just moving the stuff that gets hot to the octal sockets. So S. McDonald put in the chat, you're in Nova Scotia, Dan Trammell, Dr. Dan Amps, and tell him I sent you. But any good tech, and Dan certainly will know exactly what I'm talking about. Just moving the screen grids and the heater stuff to the octal sockets, and a few other little things. But it's a good amp. Remember my point earlier in the chat, you may not have seen it in the first hour, I talked about how the Deluxe Reverb reissue, the bog standard 65, is a much better sounding amp than most people think because it ships with such a terrible C12K speaker that just puts a blanket on top of everything. So before shipping an app here to have all kinds of crazy changes made, make sure that you have a good speaker first. Templeton Guitars, what are my thoughts on brown boxes by Amp RX? Well, I have mixed feelings because I know it's a good product and it can serve a role. And if you need to have an old amp with a lower mains voltage so that you can keep the heaters at 6.3, it is a good option. It's an expensive option, but a good option. I personally don't like the man who does that, who behind the company, because he was on several amp forums that I'm on, and he was very, very rude for no reason to a lot of really great techs and designers that I know, and well, Brad knows exactly what he was, and it's the kind of thing you can say it in Australia, but you're not supposed to say it here in America. But I just can't think of the right word. Shut your mouth, Brad. I'm just talking about. Let's see. Thank you very much, Joe Gilmartin. Got a matchless Nighthawk 15 watts with C30 EF86 pre with severe blocking distortions, fizz and swirl, 11 volt Zener across the L84 cathode resistor fault. Solves it, but prefer to find root cause. Any suggestions? I am unfamiliar with the Nighthawk. All right, so you got a Zener across the EL84, and that fixes that. I would have to have the amp on the bench. I'm sorry. I hate it when people give me a super chat like this, and I don't have a great answer for them. But I've never had that model. I don't know what else they're doing. I don't know if it's a long-tailed pair or cathodion phase inverter on that model. But I would reach out to Matchless and see what they suggest. There could be a lot of reasons for it. The first thing I would do in any case is change out the phase inverter tube, or play around with tubes in general. You can have all kinds of stuff in a tube that's wrong without knowing that you're hearing a problem. You can have an oscillation from a bad ground. There are an awful lot of things it could be, but I don't have anything specific to tell you other than first contact Matchless. I'm very sorry. Hey, Detroit Tube and Tone. I hope to be able to get to it. It's just a matter of time. I have just been so crazy busy. I have that whole plan in my head, and I've got all the stuff. And also, the thing is, I've got to get the charity company I wanted to do it for has been so difficult to communicate with. And the person who ran that department is no longer with them, and blah, blah, blah. So it may be a 75K build, but it'll happen. Hey, Indonesia. Expensive amps like Two Rocks worth the cost increase. It depends on what the brand is. Two Rocks, yeah, they're absolutely. There are other very expensive amps like Lazy J that are nowhere near worth what they're charging for, or the Fender Custom Series is nowhere near what it's worth. What there's just absolute jokes of companies charging tons of stuff. But the Two Rocks are great. They're really well built, and if you look at the cost of a Fender 1966 and adjust for inflation, that's about what a comparable Two Rock model costs. So, a smaller company who sells fewer amps a year, selling at about the same price that a larger company used to sell it as, I think that's a good thing. Now, is a Two Rock the only way to get to that level of quality? No, it's not. You could buy a 70s Fender and have it restored, and maybe have $1,500 in the amp and have something that it's going to sound every bit as good as a Two Rock. But it won't have the cachet. Now, Two Rock is also going to have that sound and an overdrive channel, depending on the model you're looking at, whereas the vintage amps tend to just be this or that. But, it comes down to the player. Robin Ford into his Dumble, Robin Ford into a Two Rock, Robin Ford into a Super Reverb is going to sound fantastic with any of those things. Sadly, Robin Ford into a Tone X is going to sound better than I would into his actual rig. But Two Rocks are absolutely priced realistically, and I'm more power to them. They're good sounding amps. Which years of Marshall heads to avoid? Everything after 1999, but really, if you could afford to, everything after 1980, everything from 83 on. Once they went to the horizontal input 800s, the circuit changed, and they skipped an entire filter section, and I don't like the sound at that point. And then it just began to sound like a bunch of overdrive pedals inside of an amplifier. Hey, Mike, 444. I have no experience with the Little Sister. I've tried other Friedmans, and every Friedman I've had has been fantastic. I have no doubt that the Little Sister is also fantastic, but I have not tried it myself. Dave makes a lot of different models, so try to play them in person, see which one speaks to you. I don't know whether, I'm a Dirty Shirley guy or a Little Sister guy or a Little Harry siblings, cousin, second removed guy. His name's, I make fun of his names to his face, and he laughs about it. But, his amps are fantastic, and he has a lot of different flavors of tone ice cream. Toto Tube, hello, hola. He's got a JCM 800 2203 model, and I want to add more gain stages to the preamplifier. What do I recommend? Best regards from Spain. Well, I have a two-part answer. Number one, I would not necessarily add more gain stages first. See if you really like that, because you can do some cathode tricks to the 2203 to V2B to get a lot more gain out. There are ways to make non-permanent mods to that amp to get a lot more gain, as long as you can keep the stability under control. Second of all, my buddy Jason Tong at Head First Amplification has got lots of videos on this. I think he just put one up the other day, and on 3 gain stages good, 4 better. So if that's the world that really interests you, I think Jason is a fantastic resource. That's Head First Amps. He's on YouTube. But before making any big mods, I would look at playing around with, okay, well, if I change this 10K to a 4.7K, and I take out change the 470K ahead of the volume pot to like 100K, and then I put in a snubber cap from plate to cathode here on V1B, then all of a sudden I'm still staying stable and I'm getting a huge gain increase. There are ways to do it before you start adding new triodes and stuff. S. McDonald, thank you for the super chat. I already answered the question, though. I want everyone to realize this. While I appreciate all the super chats, I do try to answer questions regardless, at least in the first 2 hours. last hour, sometimes the super chats do make sure that you do get answered. But if you've already asked a question, you don't have to do it again as a super chat, because by the time I see that I got the super chat, I've probably already answered it. I'm almost consistently 40 minutes behind because I actually try to give questions the real answers. Toronto, yes, Flower Girl always. Chris Church is in the Toronto area. He's in Hamilton, just outside Toronto. Chris Church, Church Audio. Tell him I sent you. He's a great guy. Really knows his shit. Yeah, Matt Johnson. I can't do the Mario Kart stuff. It's not a world I want a part of. Mike Heugel. Yeah, the Sword Atomic Space Tone, the junior and the full size are both fantastic. Highly recommend it. Play it, make sure it works for you, because it does have limitations based on the speaker size and all that. But I think they're incredibly well built amps that have a sound. See if that sound is the sound you're looking for. T777 is a fuzz face harder on power tubes. It can be. It can be. I had a power tube start to fail after using a fuzz face for a couple of weeks and wondering if there were any connections. If you're running the amp really loud and then you give it a fuzz face is a square wave. A square wave means that the RMS level goes way up, and that speaker and the tubes get hot because they're already, instead of going like this, they're just, they're. It's really a hard thing to represent a square wave. Doc, it hurts when I do this. Sometimes it causes a problem. Sometimes it reveals a problem. Sometimes it accelerates a problem that was already on its way. But a square wave is a hard thing for a tube to reproduce at full volume for extended periods of time. It's also hard on the voice coil of your speaker. So if you've got a weakness in your chain, continued high volume fuzz pedal will reveal it. That said, it can be done for a year solid, never have a problem. It's going to depend on the individual components. But yeah, it is harder. Let's see. I think. Hey, Tony Rod. I was talking about a post-phase inverter master in my last video. I always liked that feature in the Marshall Vintage Modern. Why don't more amps have them? Are there any cons? There's not really any cons. To do it in a hand-wired amp is a little more tricky to do than other things, but it is done and it is very easy to implement in a PCB build. I don't know why so many amp companies don't do it. It is one of the best solutions for a very low parts cost. There's not really any downsides to them, other than a lot of people are just copying what's come before them, and Marshall's always had it pre-phase inverter, so they continue to do that. A pre-phase inverter can be absolutely fine if the channel has just a ton of preamp gain and the output section stays pretty much clean. So you get a Friedman BE100 with like 4 or 5 gain stages. Well, it's going to have tons of gain. You're not going to lose much from the master volume before the phase inverter, and the output section stays clean. But like I showed in the Blackstar video, if the output section is contributing to the distortion, the overdrive, and you turn the pre-phase inverter down, the whole thing cleans up. Now, if that Blackstar had a way to take that fizz out when you do have it pushed, it would have been fantastic. Gracias, Juan from Spain. I appreciate that very much. That's very kind of you. If you have to replace a vibroverb, what is the closest new currently made replacement for it? I don't know of too many 2x10 that are compared to a vibroverb, but I don't think you need to replace it. If you have a ground fault, my God, get it fixed. Don't worry about some insurance company that's probably scamming you anyway. They're not going to have any, they're not going to know what they're talking about when it comes to a guitar amp. I'm sure as far as the actuary tables go, they're going to tell you to get a pod. I'm not sure if there's much of difference between the Mojotone and StewMac kits. I'd have to look at each of them. I was under the impression that those two companies have kind of partnered with each other to kind of spread customers from one to the next. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure they're the same kit. I have not looked at StewMac's page on that though. So until I do, I don't have a fully informed decision. If you want to play it safe, go with Mojotone. They're certainly going to have cheaper shipping. Says, I mentioned working at a vintage guitar store in the past. What were some of the more unique or interesting pieces of gear I saw came through? Well, there was a Vox guitar with an organ built into it that worked. That was pretty cool. It sounded horrible in really cool ways. We had one of the Rickenbackers with the light show with a plexiglass body. That weighed a ton and got really hot, but it worked and looked like something, guitar used in remember the thing the Sleestacks went to with all the lights? Yeah, it was that kind of thing. Various cool old guitars that I should have bought or stolen or figured out how to get at the time. Like there was a 64 SG Junior for $400. And I didn't buy it because I thought, well, I'm going to want more than one pickup. And at the time I would have. I was 17, 18. But now I'm like, $400. This is 88, 87. 66 Rickenbacker 360, $600. Stuff in retrospect, I'm like, man, if I get that TARDIS or that flux capacitor going, I know where to go. Anything else that really stands? I mean, lots of cool stuff, but in terms of unique or stuff that you don't see very often, he got a deal, I think, from someone's estate, and for a while he had like 6 different Italian Vox guitars, the full range, like a full band's worth of Vox Italian stuff, like a hollow body bass with that tiny little neck. Weird stuff. But then, just 62 Strats and 58 Tellys and 67 335s, all the boring stuff that we can't afford now. Thank you, Robert D. I think we're talking, I think we're at the first break now, just in time to almost take the second break. So I'm only running about an hour behind. What are any recommendations for Vox AC30 style kits? If not, what are my thoughts on the Vox AC30 S1 with the FET input stage? I have not tried the S1. I've not had one on the bench. I've seen that Frank had one, and I need to ask him about it. I've not had a chance to call him about that. From what I saw in his video, it is very similar to the AC10C design with the FETs, but there are things which seem to be much better as far as dealing with heat than the AC10. But what I don't know is whether they do the same unipole 5-volt supply for the effects loop and reverb driver stuff, that the 10C does, which just cripples that amp. So I don't know whether the AC30 S1 implements the MOSFET stuff well. I know that the MOSFETs are the only thing that are done well is about the solid state parts of AC10 C1. So I hope that the AC30 S1 is good, but I don't know that it is until I have one on my bench or confirm with someone I trust, like Frank. I don't know any good AC30 stall kits. Mojotone has got a great AC15 stall kit, but they don't do a 30-watt version. But the AC30 custom, the AC30 C1, C2 and C2X, it's a fantastic amp. It also has a head version. And it costs quite a bit less than this Blackstar, but this Blackstar is better than the Vox hand-wired AC30, but the Blackstar also costs more than the hand-wired AC30. The one downside about this Blackstar is that it just looks so generic. It looks like nothing. Let's see if I can show you guys. I remember how to do this. I've got to turn on the Wi-Fi and minimize this and go to the camera. And is this thing going to show up? Yeah. All right, cool. So you spend your $2,500 and that's your amp. Looks really generic. I wouldn't feel good spending all that money just to get, something that bland. And the Tolex is that burgundy stuff, rich Corinthian leather. Behind it is a 64 AC30 and the 58 Bassman and then a 68 custom deluxe reverb, all of which look much cooler. So I guess all the money went to the inside of the amp because they didn't spend any on cosmetics or aesthetics. All right, let me disconnect that because I get much better streaming without using the Wi-Fi for it. All right, where were we? Speaking of, how did that 68 deluxe reverb unit turn out? Well, I'll be posting a part 2. Well, you just saw it over there. I've got one more thing to do on it, then I will be posting a part 2. I've got a remaining buzz in the reverb circuit itself I've got to track down. My 64 Handwire was a blah, 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 super spanky and bright, noisy but great. Well, if it's noisy, it's not great. Sorry, a great amp is not noisy. I don't mean to be, I'm not trying to be mean or single you out or say that you don't know what you're talking about. But there's so many great deluxe reverbs in the world that are not noisy. So when Fender makes a brand new one, charges $3,000 and tells you, oh, the noise is a feature, not a bug, yeah, they're lying to you. Talking about the joys of gatefold LPs. More importantly, how good were the Portuguese tart? Well, I'm a happily married man. I did not try the Portuguese tarts. Oh, you mean the pastries? Those were fantastic. See what I did there? Actually, no. I had been told that I had to try the Portuguese egg custard tarts. And so when we got there, I did in Lisbon at the Central Market, the Montenegra or whatever it's called. I can't remember what the company is called. A very respected one. People say, these are the best, these are the best. They were nasty. They were really hyper sweet and uninteresting. And I was so let down. I thought, well, great. Everyone's been telling me how much I love this. And it's just so bad. And I tried 2 others in Lisbon and they were not good. Now, let me say that I have tried them since in Paris and London, and those were horrible in comparison to the bad ones that you get all over Lisbon. Most of them in Lisbon are just way too sweet and sticky and not very interesting, and the ones that are being sold as that in London and Paris and New York are even worse. But then we went to Belém, and I saw the line, and I thought, well, what the hell? Let me try this. And the Pastéis de Belém are entirely different than the Pastéis de Nata. The Pastéis de Belém is one of the best tasting things, if not the best tasting thing I've ever had in my life. And let's see if I can put one up on the thing. I've got a ability to add photos here, right? Let's see here. Let's see. Photos. Let's see if I can pop this up here for you guys, because I know that, oh, come on, man. This interface. Okay. Why won't it let me sort by albums? I've got to go. This is crazy. And I can't move the thing while I'm doing it. I'll do it later. Anyway, the Pastéis de Belém are one of the best things I ever had in my life. The regular Pastéis de Nata, Pastel de Nata that they have all over Lisbon are good, but not worth having. They're too sweet. And all the Portuguese tart places in the rest of Europe are just garbage. And to the point where I begged and pleaded Pêche de Belém to sell me some frozen. I'll pay shipping, whatever. They won't. They won't. So I'm going to have to figure out how to make them, which is going to wreck my kitchen while I learn how to make just how to make the pastry, let alone everything else. But my God, they're so good. Jeff Harper, I would recommend start off with Merlin Blenco's books that he sells through valvewizard.co.uk. Kay Tucker, you're absolutely right. Hey, Rob Hunter, on the Vox, I hardwired the AC instead of going through the voltage selector. Would I recommend to do this with my 82 Marshall JCM 800? It depends. If your 82 has the old style voltage selector where you pull the thing physically out and then move it, yeah, hardwire it. If you've got the new one that actually clicks, you can do it either way. But the old one, it's not as critical on the voltage selector as it is on the speaker impedance selector. But the old Marshall style where you pull it out has the two pins that go in. If that doesn't make a good connection on your voltage selector, your amp just won't turn on. But if you have a bad one of those for your impedance selector, you can lose your load and you can kill your output tubes and your valves. Tubes, man. So. All right, so we are literally. What do you mean by Coinbase? We are literally right where we were at the last break, just in time for our next one. Greg Harrison, thank you very much. I am the maestro of AppTex. Thank you very much. I don't know about the maestro. I just talk a lot, but I do appreciate it. The kind words and that you enjoy the channel makes me feel like I'm. Seriously, I'm not doing this for clicks. I make more money off the amp work than I'd make off YouTube. But I do like getting this information out there. It's information that I wish I'd had when I was just a player, especially when I was mowing lawns to save up to buy things, and taking extra shifts and all that. Nothing's worse than working really hard and saving your money and buying the wrong thing and then finding out that everyone knew it was the wrong thing, but all the magazine ads were telling you it was the absolutely best choice in the world. And it'll make your dick bigger and you'll get laid all the time. And, just really, Mesa? Really? Verde and Super Bach. Yeah, I miss Victor. I don't miss Victor, but I saw the word Victor there. Aloha, Victor. Mahalo. I miss Super Bach as well. What was the other one? It began with an S all over the signs in Portugal. I had that too. Super Bach and Sar something. Someone will tell me, now I want a beer. I want a beer and cappuccinos and pastéis de nata and some of those little pork sandwiches with a piri-piri. World travel is good for you until you remember the wonderful things you had to eat and cannot get anywhere. Sagres, thank you, Sagres. Obrigado, Magisterium. Sagres, of course it is. All right, we're going to take our next break, and I'll see you guys back in 7 minutes. Holy cow, Rob Platt. Wow, thank you so much. I That means a lot to me. That really helps. And I mean, I appreciate all the super chats. I see one from Claritin Blue for 20 euros. Sorry, 20 pounds. That's also quite nice, but $200. Thank you so much. That means a lot to me. That's quite a bit. I have to live up to that now. Thanks so much, man. Now I got to like deliver an elevated level of content now. Thank you so much. And to you, Claritin Blue. I was coming up to you next, but Rob just dropped that big red bomb on me. I got to call that out immediately. I'll pop that up in the chat later so you get full credit. And let me call something up here because I figured out how to get to where I wanted to get faster. A couple of things, just a few fun things from my Portuguese adventure. So let's see, which button do I want here? Yes, I know it's accessing my screen. I'm telling it to access my screen. Thank you very much. I want photos. So here, Superbach, Piri Piri, those little pork sandwiches with fries. And I first put a bunch of Piri Piri on the fries. And I did not realize that they were very, very serious about their hot sauce there, which I respect. So I added some mayo to it as well and blended that in. And Péronnaise is just the best thing in the world to put on fries. And this was one of my favorite lunches ever. The bread was so good. This was a little working class thing. Everyone else in there was a working guy just stopping off the lunch break. I think this whole meal was like 10 euros, including the very good Superbach beer. There were things there like that giant crab that I could not afford, but I was glad to know such things existed outside of Dune recreations. There is the Portuguese guitar being played traditionally. This was I can't play it for you. I don't have the audio set up for that. That's actually a video I took. Maybe another time I'll get that sorted out ahead of time. So here we are going to Belém. And one of the photos here, I guess I'm on the wrong day. No, bacalhau. I'm not a fan of bacalhau. I got a better one than that. Sorry. This was almost the thumbnail for today. This is the Pastéis de Belém, and the flaky pastry, and the custard was just perfect, and a little bit almost burnt on top with the powdered sugar and the cinnamon, but it wasn't hyper sweet. It was just perfect, and a very, very good coffee, which is not something I could say about most places in Europe. And Nikki is just so damn pretty. Sorry. That's enough of that. Let's get back to AMP stuff. But I just wanted to share that since I figured out how to do it without scrolling forever within the app itself. And I'm not a huge dessert person. That was just one of the best things ever. Like I said, Claritin Blue, that's very appreciated. Thank you. And yes, funds for more coffee, since coffee is about to go up crazy amounts in the U.S., even though we don't actually grow our own coffee, so there's no competition there whatsoever. Coffee, bananas, vanilla, etc. The whole thing is just knucking futz. So hopefully I'll be able to continue to afford coffee. Discussing the price of tea in China becomes more and more relevant. Yeah, there's flooding in Arkansas. Memphis is built on a bluff. We don't get much flooding here. You have to go down to North Memphis, which is pretty much just airfields and a couple of little isolated farm areas there down by the river. We don't get much flooding here in Memphis. Well, flash floods where the sewers can't drain fast enough, but that's a different thing. I just don't go under the overpasses or underpasses. I don't drive on the underpasses when we get the flooding here. Lloyd Williams is coming from Wales. Hello, Lloyd. Lloyd, how does a valve preamp pedal, ETU Mesa 5 Twin, get enough voltage to power its valves? Thanks very much for spending the time doing this chat. Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, Millington gets flooded. Mark Spurkin, I'm sorry that you lived there. I'm glad you escaped. I spent too much time when I was working on the Navy base there. But not all pedals that use valves do have enough voltage to power the valves. There are pedals which have valves where they just turn on enough to kind of glow, and we call them marketing valves. A lot of the inexpensive ART mic pre's from the 90s were like that. And there are pedals which have a tube in them, and they have a little light bulb in there to make it look like the tube's glowing, but it doesn't. I think the Mesa is still pretty much current starved, where it could have been much better, but it has a tube in it. It says Mesa, and it still sounds okay for what it is. The flip side of that are companies like Kingsley. Kingsley does it right. They're using a real nice power chip which takes the incoming 9 volts and turns it into actual high voltage, like 200 plus volts, and they do it right. It's just a very difficult thing to do right. The other way to do it right-ish, right adjacent, would be like on the old what do you call it? Why can't I think of the name of the company? They also make amps. The Vox style heavy amps burn themselves up, and they made overdrive pedals too. And I've got them on the channel, and I can't think of the name. Matchless, duh. The Matchless stuff. They had a transformer in there, so they were actually giving it a small power transformer, took 12 volt, 120 volts AC, and did it right, except that then they had all these noise issues because the whole thing was a grounding nightmare with ground loops and microphonic cables. So short of doing it like Matchless did, where their tube pedals or valve pedals, in your case in Wales, are tiny little amplifiers, you can do what Kingsley does, which is much, much better. But most of the companies out there that are putting a tube in a pedal are just putting a tube in a pedal to say, hey, there's a tube in there. Well, that's a good reason to quit, Christopher. I don't think any beer is worth what you would have suffered if you kept up with it. I don't know what Katoomba is, but I hope you have a good time and your battery lasts long enough for your needs. Now we're talking about my Rosewood of Neck Gray Strat is a series model. Oh, the Gray Strat is a K-Line Springfield model. And it has really beautiful rosewood, unlike what you'd find on a lot of current stuff. I think it's Indian rosewood. I don't know for sure. I have not asked him. It might be Madagascar, but it is really beautiful. I might buy new strings this year. Lou says I buy new strings every month. I buy multiple sets. Trouble is, almost every guitar I use something different on, so it's not like I can just buy a case for everything. I do use the coated strings. I use the what's the brand? I'm a terrible spokesman for brands. I always forget the names. Kurt Mangan coated strings for acoustics. So 6 months is about how long they last for me. I like those. I don't like the Lixers at all, but I like the Kurt Mangans. I need to remember their names so I can get maybe an endorsement. Yeah, this video is sponsored to you by What's it called? Don't tell me. I don't think that would quite work. That's how you know I'm not sponsored. I'm not organized enough to be sponsored. Uh-oh. Andy, 1966 has got a metal break in a wood shop. The world is going to be a dangerous place. Let's see. Trying to find the next question. Richard, planning to retire and make a major move. Contemplating liquidating all my combo amps and just having a few heads and a handful of cabs. Well, I miss a combo. Well, if you're not gigging out, no, not necessarily, unless there's a combo that you just really love the sound of, in which case you would miss it, because a combo, typically open back, has a different sound than closed back, and most standalone cabs are closed back, but I don't know which cabs you have. But the main advantage of combos, of course, is portability. So if you're not going to be moving them around, you don't have to worry about that. Boy, these things have... It's 20 degrees warmer than it was 2 weeks ago, and a hell of a lot rainier. So, tugging on all the strings, bring them up to pitch. There's your guitar lesson for the day. Never tune down to a pitch. Always bring it up. Or are you just saying about temperature and humidity affect truss rod adjustments? Brad? I know this neck has probably moved quite a bit in the past 2 weeks. It'd be worth it. Doop-a-doop-a-doo. Almost there. All right, next question. Are EL84s interchangeable with 7189s? Yes. 7189 is essentially a more robust EL84 that can take a higher plate voltage, but doesn't have to. Hey, Meryl, welcome to the stream. So yeah, when you have the option to use a 7189 over an EL84, go with the 7189. Let's see. Instant coffee is a bad joke. Don't ever want to be offered instant coffee again. Do I have a favorite speaker for 5F1 champs? 8-inch speakers are tricky because they almost all suck. Some of them suck less. It depends on how much money you want to put into it. I would say the things I recommend to clients most of the time are either the G8C, because it fits in most champs and doesn't hit, it fits, it doesn't hit anything. Or if they want to spend less money, the Jensen Mod series has some 8s, which are just fine in a champ. A champ's never going to sound fantastic. It'll sound characteristic, but, one of the best things you can do is have a champ with a usable, interesting sounding 8-inch speaker, but also have an adapter so you can run that champ into a real speaker cab because you run that into a 2x12 and you hear that the amp is actually doing. And the amp sounds so much better than what can come through a little 8-inch speaker. Okay, now we're talking about a Surian. Radar indicated tornadoes slightly north. Yeah, we got tornadoes to the north west of us. But I'm fascinated that Brad is sitting there in Australia looking up tornadoes here. Brad's obsessed with tornadoes. Come here, you'll get really bored with them. They're really not all as interesting as they're made out to be. Unless one's actively on you, in which case it's fascinating for a short period of time. All right, Jeff asks, I'm leaving. If leaving your amp on all day between recordings, the best turn it on standby when not using it, or turn the volume down. If you're going to be recording, so you want to keep everything warm, you can either put it in standby and then take it out of standby about 3 minutes before you record again, or you can, if you're not in a situation where the volume has to be exactly critical, you can just turn the volume down. If it's like a master volume, you can turn the master volume down, keep everything hot, but you just don't want to be like, hey, was I like about 4 on the last take? Okay, all right, I think I was about 4. You want to keep, minimize the variables like that, obviously. As far as safe for the amp, et cetera, you can just leave it on all day, being powered on all day, with no signal going through it, and for a large period of time, won't hurt anything. Other than you'll have a higher utility bill. But if you're really concerned about noise or heat in an environment, standby would be the better option. Do they still make the reverb version of the Cerbella? I don't know. I thought they did. But contact Sir. They will tell you. Thank you, Christopher Vestland. That's very kind of you. I appreciate that. Okay, is that Norwegian? We started watching a Norwegian movie last night, Troll, which is not at all like Troll 2 here in the States, fortunately. One of the worst movies of all time. Oh, my God. But we love Troll Hunter so much. Yeah, Norwegian Krone. I was right. Or was it Krona? Wow. For once I was right. Thank you very much. And we had to stop halfway through because we had other things we had to do. But we like putting on fun movies while we eat. And we're looking forward to finishing Troll tonight. And now I understand that Norway has a fantastic culture and history, well beyond silly troll movies. But you make the world's best silly troll movies. So I just want to appreciate that. You're famous. Well, you are a bloody legend, so it doesn't surprise me. I still have no idea what Katoomba is. I assume it's some kind of music festival. No Trollolo. No Trollolo, Pastor. For those of you who don't know the Trollolo video, I give you that information skittishly. The Trollolo video, once heard and seen, cannot be unheard and unseen. But Troll and Troll Hunter, fantastic. Thoughts about the sort of modern orange solid-state amps, Working Player 53 says. They're fine. I don't think they sound fantastic, but they sound good, and they're usable, and they don't have any systemic problems other than the same problems that all current production orange amps have, including the very expensive tube ones, in that they use very long split shaft pots that like to break because the metal is so poor, and they put set screw knobs on the knurled split shaft pots, and so that the knobs themselves damage the pots. And when they break, you have to pull the board and change out a PCB mounted pot, and the only pot that fits that'll work is the same piece of crap. So the cycle starts all over itself, and it's frustrating. I don't know that I could recommend the orange solid state amps long term, but see if it rocks your world, and if so, be very careful with it and don't ever hit anything up against the knobs. The other problem is that the hieroglyphics that they use instead of control numbers is very frustrating. I have no idea what they mean by half the stuff they put on there. If you remember from hearing the Strat through it, that amp is clean. It's just loud and clean. And these are just so much fun. Sorry to do that to any of you unexpecting it, but that's what you can't do with a modeler unless you have a pedal that simulates that. And then it's not at all the same thing. Why does the United States get more tornadoes than anywhere else? Maybe it's karma these days. Bill Ivanda, I don't know a good amp tech in North Central Florida. Brad might have popped something here. Now you're saying arseholes, which will offend a lot of people. Most people because they'll think you can't spell. What are some poorly built amps I know of? I want to know what to avoid. See my amps under $500 video and amps under $1,000 video. I touch on some of the most routine, common offenders in those videos. Yeah, I have nothing but respect for Eli and Two Rock. When you try to do something at a high quality level, there's going to be a high price point associated with it, and so people are going to say you're this, or you're that, blah blah, and then someone's going to be like saying, oh, all you need is this $100 thing from Mark I or whatever the most recent Chinese import thing is for $100, where I like when people try to make the best thing they can possibly make. And when you're playing at Jeff's level and you're touring Europe, you can use whatever the fuck you want to use, and it's justified. If you're gonna play at home just for practice, maybe it's overkill. But if you're a professional, it's a professional tool. So. Eric Thibault asks, I'm wondering how the output wattage is determined at the design stage. Thank you as always. Well, greetings from Montreal. Well, merci, Eric. Thank you. I need to get to Montreal. I've been planning on going for years, and hopefully that'll still be possible. And sadly, I'm afraid that if I go, they'll make me come back here at some point. But how do the output wattage determine at the design stage? Well, you can look at the transformers used, and you say, all right, I'm aiming for 45, 50 watts. Well, I can get there with a pair of EL84s and get there with a pair of 6L6s. To get there, I'm going to want to have this kind of primary impedance on the output transformer of what's available in the market. These are my options. All right, well, to drive that, I'm going to need at least X volts. That's going to choose which power transformer I get. And depending on what's on the market, I may have to, at that point, have to decide whether to do a full bridge or a single bridge rectifier. whether to do solid state or tube rectification. I can use this thing, but I'm about 10 volts too high, or I'll go with a tube rectifier, or I'll emulate a tube rectifier. You can do all these kinds of things. And the nice thing is today we can do all this in a program called LT Spice, which is fairly accurate within a certain margin for things like this. And you can say, all right, if I change this, this changes that. But you can also just do it the old-fashioned way with pencils and paper. And then you can say, well, I know that once I get this put together, I should be able to bias this in such a range that I'm going to be, clean at about 48 watts or 48 to 51 watts, depending on the tubes, whatever. Beyond that, you would have to look into how this entire thing works in terms of what's actually happening with LC filters versus RC filters versus this kind of secondary, this kind of rectifier, that kind of rectifier, the how much filtering each stage has. It can get pretty deep, but that's the overview. That's the view from space. Recommendations for a bench scope Tektronix for around 2K. Just like Brad says, I suggest a Riggle and a Holiday for that price. Yeah, the one I've got here, I think I paid $300 for it, $250, and it does more than I'll ever need it to do, and it can do computerized reports and all kinds of stuff that I'll never get into. If you're designing something to go to space or attached to the Hubble, yeah, you'll need to spend a lot more, but for bench scopes, we're using the most basic, rudimentary 1950s stuff. This stuff in the old Frankenstein movies, all that stuff would still be useful here. And I've been trying to get a Van de Graaff generator in this joint for years. Alex G, thank you. My opinion on Ampeg reissue reverb rocket amps. Now, I don't know if they have one now. When I hear Ampeg reissue reverb rocket, I'm thinking of the 90s stuff, which was pretty crappy. But if they have a new one, I'm unaware of it. I did not know that Ampeg really was still in the game when it comes to guitar amps these days. If I could be incorrect. But if you're asking about like the 90s reissues, those things just have so many crappy aspects of their design. I would avoid them. They're the next tier down below Crate. Crate was actually better when it came to like the Vintage Club series and stuff. And they don't sound like the old Ampegs either. So. Hey, Progress Pedals, same 5F6A kit. Your guidance helped me understand Master Volume Collapse's presence. Still chasing high-end crackle, decreased bright caps, better cleans, breakup still crappy, kit output transformer, possible culprit. I would have to see your build to know. I would suggest that it could be solder joints. I would suggest it could be the ground scheme. I don't know what you've built. Or if it's bad components in your kit. If you can give more details, I could possibly give you better suggestions. But a 5F6A should not be a particularly bright amp, should not have any high-end crackle. That could just be bad tubes. The breakup should be really nice. Are you using a 12Y3 or a 12AY7 or a 12AX7 for V1. Do one stage at a time. Don't do all this stuff in the amp. Don't think I'm going to do all the caps in the amp, or I'm going to do one stage at a time. Work from the input jack to the phase inverter, and just look at every bit and make sure that all your wiring is as neat as possible, that every solder joint is as good as possible. And start with a 12AY7, especially if you want to have smoother breakup, and you'll have really nice cleans. And then, because a 12AX7 in that amp is like punishment mode. It can be fine to use, but you need to make sure the amp is rock solid before you yank the gain up with a 12AX. Hey, Cole Hatfield. He currently has the Vox AC30 65 Deluxe Reverb and the DSL-40CR, based on what you've seen on my channel. Wow. Well, nice to be taken seriously. I'm surprised that you have all three. I could see having the Deluxe and the AC30, but the DSL-40CR is kind of a one, covering a lot of bases for top 40 things in my opinion. But if it works for you, that's great. It's a good amp for what it is. Looking for a low watt tweed style circuit. What would I recommend? Well, the 5E3 is the best. The 5E3 and the Harvard are the best low wattage tweed amps. The Champ and the Princeton have too many drawbacks, in my opinion. The 5E3 is the way to go. But you don't have to get a Fender. You might want to check out maybe getting a Swart Atomic Space Tone Junior used. I think those are used, going for like $700. That's going to be a lot less for that than you would get for, say, a 5E3 deluxe kit build on eBay by some guy who doesn't know what he's doing. But if you're going to build one yourself, go to Mojo Tone and build their 5E3 kit. Yeah, you'll be very happy with that. I was going to go to Tashi Station to pick up some power converters. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. Yeah, Slee Stacks. Slee Stacks weren't a sign of being a proud nerd. Slee Stacks were just a sign of being alive in 1974, because that was the most terrifying fucking thing on all of television, except for that one episode of The $6 Million Man where he fought Sasquatch. Because that robot Bigfoot fucked me up, man. I can use my full fucking vocabulary in the third hour. Thank you for allowing me my full fucking mode of expression. Let's see. Yeah, don't buy the Fender 57 reissue. Get a 5E3 from someone else. Build your own. Never pay the Fender surcharge. What that company is becoming is so sad. What was that show with the Slee Stacks? Land of the Lost, Andy. Land of the Lost. Yeah, Martin, they were just used guitars. People reminiscing on used guitar prices. Yeah, it's you live long enough, you get more regrets. You're very welcome, negative 6 dB threshold. Are high gain amps inherently more noisy, Martin asks? Yes, they are. But there are ways of mitigating that. But, anytime you amplify something by a factor of 1,000, all the background stuff comes up by a factor of 1,000. So your white noise is separate from other noises. So you can't get rid of all the white noise, but you can get rid of a lot of the other stuff. I have to try the quejadas in Sintra in a bakery called Periquita, and their pastéis are great too. Well, we did not make it to Sintra. We thought about doing it, but we left a day early to spend more time in Florence, which I don't regret because Florence. But we definitely want to come back to Portugal, and we want to go to Porto and Sintra, and all the little towns in between some day. And I would be glad to try Periquita. I'm so damn hungry now for things I cannot have. And Fred R. says there's a Portuguese bakery in Madrid near Caio Metro that has pastries, and they are wonderful. Good, because they are not good in London or Paris. I had high hopes, especially for the one in Paris, and was not. It's really hard to find a bad pastry in Paris, but they managed. Bottom kitchen, yes. A rectifier tube with a little flake inside? Yeah, you can have all kinds of problems. You should not have little flakes inside your tubes in general, but especially not a rectifier tube. That flake used to be part of something important. Did Amnesia, best way to get my 65 Deluxe Reverb reissue to get to the bright spankiness of the 64 hand-wired and going to sell it, but I wanted to recreate that high Bart clarity. It's the same circuit, aside from some dumb stuff they do on the 64. But the 65 Deluxe Reverb reissue, if yours has the C12K, you're not hearing the high end that the amp actually is producing. Get a good speaker. With a good speaker, in fact, the 65 Deluxe Reverb will be a little bit brighter because in stock form it has a bright cap that the 64 does not have. Take the bright cap out of the 65 Deluxe Reverb reissue and put in a good speaker. And on the channel this week, I've had quite a few good speaker choices up on the channel. But any of them, almost, spin the wheel of speakers, every one of them is going to sound better than the C12K. I have not dealt with Rob at Eurotubes. I have nothing but respect for him and have heard good things about him, but I live 20 minutes from Tube Depot, so I tend to do Tube Depot. And I have bought a lot from the Tube store pre-COVID because they had some really nice stuff that they were having made as their brand, but have not bought as much since COVID because that just kind of derailed all that for a long time. Between COVID and then Russia's wonderful actions in Ukraine, a lot of those tubes have not been available. Let's see, where was that? Does each 12AX7 in the preamp section represent a gain stage? If so, does an amp with multiples always have more gain than one with only one or two? Well, Alex 241, it's tricky. Each 12AX7 has two triodes. Each triode can be a gain stage, and each one can be an independent gain stage. Some amps, they will parallel the two triodes to make one gain stage. Some amps, they will use only one triode of a 12AX7, and the other one's just unused. But in a lot of times you'll see triodes used for other things beyond gain. One triode may be the LFO driver for a tremolo circuit. One triode may be a makeup gain stage for a reverb. So if you see an amp with 6 preamp tubes and an amp with 3 preamp tubes, you don't necessarily have more gain from the amp with 6 preamp tubes because the 6 preamp tubes are in a Fender Princeton and the 3 preamp tubes are in a 2204 Marshall. And that 2204 Marshall, which doesn't have reverb, doesn't have vibrato, and everything is dedicated to just doing what it does, has a lot more gain than the Princeton reissue. But in general, yes. Every time you see a 12AX7, there are 2 triodes. So each 12AX7 could have 2 gain stages within it, but they're not always used that way. Is there a noticeable sonic difference between a plate-driven and cathode follower tone stack? Yeah. How noticeable is going to depend on the player, their ears, their sensitivity to things. But yeah, in general, there's a more immediate response to a plate-driven tone stack, and it can at higher volumes. At higher volumes, there can be a little more feeling of control on the right hand with the cathode follower. And this is where talking about this stuff is difficult because no language really has a vocabulary for this kind of thing. They feel different. I'm just going to say they feel different. One is better or worse, not objectively. They're just different. So, a twin reverb is plate-driven, can feel awesome. A Marshall and a Vox traditionally are cathode-driven. They feel and play awesome, but those amps all have a different feel. So if you're doing your own design work, play around with each and see what you think. If you're buying an amp, don't worry about what it is inside. Play it and see how it feels in comparison to other things on the market. Thinking out loud, does it make any sense to ground to the ground of the supplying B plus node? Well, Kyle, I think what you're asking, basically, the best way to do is to have your first B plus node, which is called the reservoir, that go to ground to chassis by itself, and the only other thing that goes to chassis ground, however you do it, whether it's directly to chassis or a ground connection there, that should be shared with an HT center tap if present, or whatever if there's no HT center tap, your negative of your diode bridge should be there. So put your rectification and your HT secondary grounds with your reservoir grounds by themselves, either going to chassis right there or running to the main ground point of the amp by themselves, not shared with anything else along that wire or that path. And don't ground anything else there. That is the noisiest ground in the entire amp. So it makes sense to not ground to that ground, but that ground must be made. And there's what Rob Platt was kind enough to say and do earlier. So Rob, I want to thank you again. That's really humbling, and I'll have to step up. Thank you. We got about 13 minutes left, so I'm going to try to make sure I get as many questions as possible. This is the part of the chat where my eyes start to swim because I've got this big bright light right here, and I'm going between it and the screen. My eyes begin to people talk about the lobster and the slee stacks. That's right. Hey, Rick 771612. My amp is producing white noise when I play a note, but it stops when I'm not playing. I replaced the V1 and phase inverter tubes, but the issue persists. Any ideas? Cheers. I don't know what amp you have, Rick. That could be a speaker. That could be a small vibration in your cabinet. I don't know. I would need to know what amp you're talking about. See if you can pop that into the chat before we end up today. Seth B., you just don't know what you're talking about, man. Piri Piri is not regular hot sauce. And ketchup is for children. Flying Rat, I don't know why you'd put that on the input and output of an op amp. I only put caps like that on the rails, but I mean, I could think of reasons to do it, but I'd have to see the circuit to speculate beyond that. I mean, you're gonna get a little bit of a high-end roll-off. I mean, you won't have, keep it from oscillating, but it seems an overkill way to do that, and there's so many better ways to do it. Sometimes when you get buffering, watching one of these things, if you go back and then re-enter the stream, all that goes away. It's a thing with YouTube servers. It was really bad about 3-4 weeks ago on a whole bunch of channels, but it still happens from time to time. And it's a YouTube server thing. I think the connection times out and it starts to lose sync. Alex 241, that's why I'm here, to save people from buying a Blues Junior, because they are so bad and so insulting to musicians. Mr. Plinkett, got some Totino's pizza rolls. I don't do a Mr. Plinkett voice. Any thoughts on Weber speakers? Their speakers are great. The rest of the stuff they sell, avoid. I've got a 72 Fender Twin Reverb with original Utahs and to be reconed. Are they worth the repair cost? To some people, yeah, not so much to me. I'm not a big fan of Utahs, but they are period correct, and you can get them reconed. And Weber is one of the good choices. I'm not sure what Weber makes it be equivalent to a Utah. Most people with a twin going with Webers would go with like a 12F 150. And then there are like 3 or 4 sub-variants of the 12F 150. Or they might go with their version of the old Fanes, if you're more into a Floydy kind of thing. Hey, Matthew Dunn, replacing the diodes in a 66 twin reverb, any 1N4007 is fine. You can, 1N4007 is made by just about every company out there. And they're all going to be the same. If I have a Desert Island amp, it would have room for a lot of people and a built-in outboard motor, and I want to get off the island. I love this question. I always assume that there's electricity on this island. If I could have only one amp, I could probably make do with a good AC30, good 5E3 Deluxe, even a Deluxe reverb, if I can have a Desert Island overdrive pedal as well. Hey, and December official, thank you for joining us from Belgium. Let's see. Well, I'm glad it missed you down there in Coldwater, Merrill. Yeah, it gets scary, but Memphis is rarely directly affected by tornadoes, just because the geography of why the city was put here. The bluff really affects wind patterns, and most of the tornadoes go north and south of us. I did not say which I preferred in the WGS versus Alessandro. I like all three for different reasons. Have I thought about 2x12 speaker suggestions for your Mojotone cab for the basement? Well, Merrill, I didn't know we were getting you a Mojo. You have a Mojotone cab for the basement? I've got your basement, but I didn't. Call me after this. I didn't know that you needed a speaker suggestion. I'll let you come over here and play a bunch of these things that we've got here, and that help you make an informed decision. Thank you, Hucky Bridge. It means a lot to me, both for your kind words and the fact that people are watching from Switzerland, and that people in Switzerland and other parts of the world are still putting up with us. Yeah, you live halfway between the Gulf and Canada, and between Canada and the Gulf of Mexico, you get tornadoes. Let's see, going through the Chuck Norris jokes in the last 5 minutes. What transistor do I prefer for a Dallas Rangemaster? John Newton. I don't recall. I'm sorry. I haven't built one of those in a few years, and I don't recall. It's got numbers in it, but I don't remember. I'm sorry. I have not checked out the new Bob Mould record yet, Richard. I will. I admit that I have less high an opinion of Chuck Norris than some of you seem to. Let's see. Well, that's what I said, Seth. 5e3 is best, and the Tweed Harvard is probably a close second for that kind of thing people talk about when they talk about Tweed fenders. This is the exciting part where I'm just reading people's comments to each other, trying to make sure I'm not missing any really urgent questions that only I can answer in the last 4 minutes. I appreciate everyone being here, and I try to answer as many questions as I can. But this is now people talking about buffering. All right. Thank you, Andy, 1966. I appreciate all the kind words here. Anthony White. I don't work on converting things to guitar amps. It's just so easy to play guitar, to make guitar amps out of from scratch. I don't like to transmogrify old things to new purpose. All right, Meryl, I'll call you and we'll talk about the cab for your basement and cabin speakers. I thought you had one. Sorry, I misremembered. And Daniel, can you ask something? You need to ask it soon because we got like 2 minutes. Have not played GoldenEye yet, Josh, because I'm trying to find a controller where the stick is worth shit. I've got 2 more coming, and hopefully I'll be able to get that sorted. Uncle Ike, I got a lot of suggested improvements for the 5e3 that I'll be showing when I build one soon. In the meantime, I've got several videos up of 5e3s that I've restored from 56, 57, 58, 59. And on some of those, I do show some changes on those already. All right, Daniel replaced a switch in his Marshall GSL-40C, but the contact pad on the PCB came off. Can it still be repaired, or am I doomed? You've got depends on how many came off. If you separated the pad from the PCB, you need to find where that pad connects elsewhere on the board. So if you have this pad right here, and that's where it's supposed to connect, that pad will have a wire, a trace, going some other place, and see if it goes over here. You can put a wire from the switch to that connection if that pad's gone. If you don't have the right temperature gear, if you don't have the right soldering iron, desoldering equipment, if you can't control the temperature, you might be better off stopping and bringing it to a tech and say, "Pretty please, can you fix this? I'm sorry," because you can continue. You could do a chain reaction of burning things if you don't have the right temperature working on PCBs like that. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to make you feel bad, but I'd rather you feel a little bit embarrassed than have you really permanently damage your amplifier. But, temperature control and technique are everything when it comes to working on those boards. Lloyd Williams, thank you for being here, and I appreciate everyone being here. It is that time. We're going to wrap this up, and be well, and we'll see how fucking crazy the world gets this week. Who else here had Tariff Penguins on their bingo card for band names of 2025? Anyone? Bueller. See you guys.